Welcome back to this week's Pro vs. Pro. We've got the playoffs coming up. Super excited for that. We'll talk about the new format. We'll talk a little bit about last week, some Ryder Cup decisions, big, tough decisions coming up. Justin, how are you feeling about this week?
I'm more excited about this week than I was last week for sure. I'm glad last week's over. I struggled a little bit to get all my stuff together. I had all the right people in all the wrong places, so pretty frustrating to just miss cashing in every one of my lineups. But I'm pretty excited about the future of golf and what we're learning about golf right now. And I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen. And this playoff format is going to kind of answer a lot of questions of how serious. I'll be interested to see the ratings at the end of this week of how they do as far as viewership.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's almost like the tour has done themselves a disservice with the elevated events, because I think the reason why the FedEx Cup playoffs are already at a disadvantage compared to playoffs in any other sport is because the crowning achievement in the sport is not what you can win in the FedEx Cup playoffs. It's winning a major. And what did they do this year? They then added these other events that are, supposed to be more prestigious than the average event. And so it just makes the playoffs take like even a further step back. So I think they've made it almost harder on themselves to make these weeks matter as much as they would like them to mean. But at the same time, I think the other disservice that they did themselves, this is already a 70-man field, no cut event. And for whatever reason, we love cuts. We like to see guys have to battle to make the weekend. And so, yes, was last week's event a little bit more intriguing just because they had so many quality players show up solely for the purpose of trying to make this week? Yeah, but the result is then this week's less intriguing.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't watch it all if it weren't for DraftKings. I would probably not watch one single shot this week, next week, or at Eastlake. And Eastlake's where I played the USAM. You would think I would be like, oh, I played there, would have a little bit more enjoyment out of watching it. I literally, outside of DraftKings, and I probably won't even play anything at Eastlake unless there's I find a way to find a huge advantage, but that's hard to find there. So, I just don't. I think that it's all kind of dumb. I'm not a huge fan of this playoff deal in general. I think we could have 3 really good events, with a lot of really good players at really good golf courses.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to cut the field a little bit, okay. Even if you want to pay the guys everybody that makes it into the event, right? Say you take 144 players that have earned their way in the top 144, and you want to say, hey, if you finish dead last, you're getting $50,000 because you've earned this through the season, and have 4 playoff events that way. Okay, let's get behind something like that. But this is just, it's kind of dumb. It's kind of, I'm really happy to see Lucas Glover get in because he deserves it. He's played really, really good golf the last few weeks. The last month to 2 months, you can talk a lot about what he's done. That lab putting, with the long lab putter, it's cheating if you can do it. It's unbelievable how good it is. I'm pretty sure that he called them and said, hey, build me what Adam Scott has. And that's what they did. And that's what he's using. And it's obviously working for him. So I'm happy for guys like that are getting here. But as far as the total format, I just think there's so much that could be done to make this better.
Yeah, I think our good buddy, previous co-host of Fade the Narrative with me, Jeff Feinberg, has said it well kind of throughout the season that you can't buy the magic that exists in golf. And he has said that largely in relation to LIV, but I think it also applies to the FedEx Cup playoffs. The magic of golf is around the majors. It's the Lucas Glover type stories, and trying to make the FedEx Cup matter more just because you're throwing more money at the winners is never going to create what they're trying to create. I don't necessarily know that there is an answer. I don't know that there needs to be an answer, right? We don't necessarily need to have the playoffs because, again, the crowning achievements in golf are the major championships. We already have that in place. The playoffs, in a lot of ways, are therefore just like what the NBA is trying to do with this midseason tournament that very few people are probably going to care about, right? Like, especially at that time of year, I should say, when, you know, your team might be in the playoff hunt. That's what you care about. You don't care about this mid-season sort of thing. So it does feel a little bit forced. And for as long as it feels a little bit forced, I don't think it will ever be more than it currently is. And I don't think it's something that needs to be fixed. I think they could just drop the playoffs altogether, just make more tournaments, and we'd all be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Make the rich richer? Like, what are you trying to prove? Like, we all know who the best players are. We know who. It's just not like other sports. Mm-hmm. The only way that this playoff system could work is if they make golf a team event. Yeah. I've said this since the deal with Liv, and I wish Liv would have done this, because I think that, and maybe they will, I wish they would make it like every other sport. Why can we not have an 8-player team for Dallas, Philly, Chicago, Orlando? We could create 48-player teams in a literally so fast, and then you go to the course and however you want to determine who's your starting 5, like we did in college, or play all 8 or whatever, however it makes it work number wise. And if we want to go that route with golf, I think there could be a market for it. I've always said if you could find enough backing to where people are playing, like all these guys have guaranteed money. So if you make your city's team, whatever that is, you're getting paid these contracts just like the other guys are, but you're also getting paid on how you finish every week. I really think that could work, but you've got to get somebody, A, with enough money to do it, B, that's forward-thinking enough to do it, and then C, to try to get these – I mean, like, if you're a Rory, why would you buy into something like that?
Right.
You're like, I've made my whole life. I've made all my money. I have nothing to worry about ever. I just think that there's so much more potential for all this. I don't know that I know all the answers for how it could be done, but I just think there's a lot of stuff that could be done to really, if you want a playoff system and you want to be relevant at the end of the year, there's different ways to do it than what we're doing here. I mean, like I said, I'm not interested in watching. I love this golf course they're playing this week too. Like, it's a shame that this is what we're doing at this golf course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree. I also think a less drastic idea, but that kind of runs along the same thought process, is you just turn the playoffs into match play, especially now they've gotten rid of match play. You just make the playoffs match play, because at least then it's enough of a change of pace that we're still going to be super interested in it, right? Like, every single year when the match play comes around, it's this tremendous breath of fresh air. We love that, just different product for that 1 week. And if we had that in the playoffs, at least then it's a different type of golf that you're watching. It's a different type of competition. What it takes to win is a little bit different, just like we talk about with playoffs in other sports. Like, what it takes to win in the regular season is not necessarily what it takes to win in the postseason. It's especially true in NBA, for example. So I do think that's potentially the route they end up going. And I've been hopeful that in taking out the match play tournament, that was kind of their thought process. But I'm losing hope, since we haven't heard that yet. And we do know that the match play is gone for next year.
And you could even do, like, this week, basically they're playing for a full purse, 144 players. And you're playing for a full purse like a normal event. Mm-hmm. It's everybody that's made the playoffs. But if you finish in the top 64, you're going to a match play event next week, right? So you've earned your way to the playoffs, and now you're top 64. I mean, obviously it probably wouldn't be that. They would have to stagger it, right? Scheffler, Rahm, those guys are guaranteed in. And maybe even you go to 128 and you start on Tuesday, right? So you go to 128 players and start a day earlier. And I mean, there's so many options with this to guarantee your top 64 and your next 64 get into match play the next week with them. And then your 1 seed's playing 128. And you know what we're doing? We're all talking about it. We're all excited about it. We're all, hey, this is going to be really fun. Instead, we get 70 guys playing a great golf course for, I mean, what are they like to try to move on to Eastlake? Like, come on. What are we doing?
Yeah. Before we jump into TPC Southwind and the course fit model, which a little bit of a sneak peek is a really exciting one, and one that I think favors us quite a bit. I want to touch just a little bit, at least, on the Ryder Cup discussion. JT showed a really nice battle, played some of the better golf that we've seen him play over the last few months. You got Bryson DeChambeau firing a 58 out of nowhere. Granted, like, it wasn't the greatest 58. I mean, when you look at like how his score related to the other scores in the field, it was, I think I saw upwards of like the 21st best performance over the last 2 years or something in professional golf, something along those lines. Anytime you break 60, like, let's face it, it's phenomenal. But just where do you land on this discussion? Do you think JT deserves a spot? Do you think Bryson deserves a spot? How much are you basing this decision on, who has earned it versus who do you think can show up the best and help the team the most?
Man, there's so many ways to go on this conversation. There's so much. My opinion is it's not like JT has Tiger Woods amount of majors won. It's not like JT has had this huge dominant career. He's been a great, great player, but he's not been a Rory dominator. He's not been a Jon Rahm dominator. Mm-hmm. If you spend a Ryder Cup year not being able to be a top 70 player in the world, you probably should not be on the Ryder Cup. You know it's a Ryder Cup year. You know what you're getting into. You know what it is. And not only is he didn't make the playoffs, he didn't make the playoffs with 10 to 15 to 20 guys that went to live that probably would have finished ahead of him as well. Mm-hmm. So not only did he not finish top 70, but he probably really would have been around 100th if everybody from live was playing. So it's just it doesn't make sense to me. Like, why would he get a spot over, especially now that the PGA Tour is back down to live and wants to form this deal together? Like, he doesn't deserve it this year, which is fine. He can go. There's no doubt in my mind he'll be back. Like, I truly believe that he'll figure it out and be back. I think he's that talented. And that being said, he could, if he got in the Ryder Cup and went 3-1, if he played 4 matches, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, he's that good if he figures it out. But has he earned it right now? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think this is where it's an important distinction to me to phrase it as, are you basing this on who has earned it, or are you basing this on who gives you the best chance to win? Because I think the argument for JT is definitely not that he deserves it or that he's earned it through his play this season. It's that given his performance on past U.S. teams, given the connection and the success that he and Spieth have had together in these events, that's why you would put him on the team. And I think that there is an argument to be made for that from that angle.
He was in much better form when he helped all those teams.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's the counter, right? Is, just because he's done it in the past doesn't mean he's going to do it now when he's not playing as well. And I've made this point 100 times on this show, on previous shows, that if all that mattered was how much you cared, then you would always play well. He would have played well throughout this entire season. And in fact, he even pointed to how badly he wants this as one of the reasons why he maybe has struggled more than he anticipated. So a little bit of a caveat there, or corollary, I should say, to kind of poke fun at all the people who were like, hey, I'm playing JT this week because I know that he wants it so bad. Hey, that could just as easily work against him. And certainly it hasn't worked for him over the last few months. But yeah, it's a really, really difficult decision. But I do think it's worth making that distinction, that it's not necessarily who has earned it. It's also who do the captains think give them the best chance to win this week.
I think what's sad about the whole deal is when we get there, the media is going to just talk about whoever this spot goes to. It doesn't matter if it's Bryson, Justin Thomas, Taylor Gooch, anybody. This is all they're going to talk about. And they're not going to talk about who's on the team or who's doing what. They don't, like, it literally doesn't matter to them, right? Yeah. They're going to just use this as a talking point. So It's a lose-lose situation for everybody.
How disappointed do you think they were when Harman won the Open? Because all of a sudden they're like, there's one spot that they weren't going to give that's now locked up, and now they have to, they lost essentially a captain's choice in a lot of ways from that.
Yeah, but I think if there's one guy that deserves to be there, he's one of them. Like, he has the right mentality. He's a great locker room guy. Like, he's the right person for the job. The problem is he's not. I don't know how else to put this, but he's not a cool kid, right? He's not a media sweetheart. He's not going to do any of this fancy BS. He doesn't care what people think. He talks about going home and riding on his tractor after he wins. He's not worried about much. And that's just not what the media wants. And I think it's great. I think that the guys are going to love to be around him. He's basically Scotty Scheffler attitude, but he's not as good as Scotty Scheffler. But Scotty's the same way. Like, Scotty doesn't want any attention. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. It's just unfortunate that the way people are treated, and he's just not, he doesn't fit into he doesn't make videos and draw all this attention. He just goes about his business.
I do think another interesting point regarding Harman is, if there's a Ryder Cup he's going to make, this is probably one of the better ones, right? When it's not on a really long course that the U.S. is kind of hand selected to give them the largest advantage that they can because of the length of the golf course, like the last time they won. But it's one of these European courses that might really reward his accuracy, just the way it did when he won this Open Championship. Along those lines, do you think that Bryson would have a better argument to make the team if this was a U.S. hosted Ryder Cup than what it is this year?
Not now. I mean, he's kind of dialed it back, and he's playing more normal golf than he, when he was all beefed up. So, and Justin Thomas hits it plenty far. It's not like he doesn't hit it anywhere. It's not like I think at this point it comes down to, unfortunately, it's going to come down to perception and what people are going to think of Zach Johnson. He's not going to make, in my opinion, he's not going to pick people on merit. He's going to pick what everybody is going to give him the less grief for. So that means I probably guess Justin Thomas is going to make the team.
Yeah, I kind of think he will as well. I will say, though, Bryson has dialed it back, sure, but his numbers off the tee, like the distance numbers, are still popping like crazy. When he just won at the Greenbrier, he was averaging 36 yards gained per drive over the field. So he's still doing it through power without question. And in the majors this year, he's just been dominant off the tee. 1.8 gained per round, the PGA 1.2 at the US Open, and then 0.98 per round at the Open Championship. 1.6 at the Masters as well. So off the tee is still his bread and butter without question, even though the rest of his game does seem to be kind of bouncing back more like it was at his peak on the PGA Tour.
So I got a question. Do you think there's anybody that can go dominate the next 3 weeks and earn their spot, that take away this whole conversation? Is there anybody that can, on the outside looking in, that can go play good enough to not have to worry about this conversation?
Yeah, I think there are a bunch, honestly. I mean, there's this enormous group. So for those unfamiliar, currently it's Scheffler 1, Wyndham Clark 2, Brian Harman 3, Brooks 4, Xander 5, Cantlay 6. Now, I kind of feel like Schauffele, Cantlay locked in no matter what, even if they play poorly and fall out of the automatic bids. Brooks, I don't really know exactly how far he can or will fall. That's kind of an odd one, but I would think that winning one major and being close at the Masters would be enough to get him on regardless. But man, there's this huge group like Homa, Cam Young, Spieth, Keegan, Morikawa, Burns, Ricky Fowler, JT, all of those guys, or at least all of those guys who are still playing, if they rattle off a win or they contend 2 straight times, something like that, any one of those guys could either still qualify automatically or just make themselves an extremely strong case to be chosen. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know how Keegan doesn't make the team right now. Like, it would be
yeah.
hard to leave him off. I think if Fowler or Cam Young win, they make that choice a little bit easier. They're definitely on. But once again, like Cam Young, if we're going to talk about driver and it not being as important,
Yeah.
like, is Zach Johnson paying attention to that, or is that not matter? You know, like, where are we going to draw the line with all that stuff? There's a bunch of them that I just think, what if Henley were to win 2 of the next 3 weeks? I mean, he's in probably by points, but what if he were to go dominate 1 week and then play okay and he's technically out? Like, he gets an invite, right, with the year he's had. I mean, there's just a lot of guys that are kind of on that edge of what do you do with them?
Henley's currently 20th, but I think the point is well made. And I think it gets back to just how loaded the U.S. squad is. Like, there are going to be some really quality players left off, and there are going to be guys who are left off who, by any definition, earned it. And it's just that there isn't enough room to include everybody who earned it, which I think gets back to, like, that's another reason why JT, somebody who hasn't earned it this year, maybe shouldn't get that bid when there are so many who have. But yeah,
if we had this conversation 6 months ago, Homo would be on the team. The problem is, it's what have you done for me lately, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does that matter too? Like, Homo shouldn't be in the discussion for the year he's had, but what he's done lately has just not been very good.
Yeah, and he's one out. So Homa's one that, like, because we're talking about, hey, what have you done for me lately? And he hasn't done much. It's like we're giving him maybe less respect than you might think for the guy who's the first spot out of the automatic bids. So if he does show up in one of these events and plays really well, all of a sudden, okay, now it sounds like, he should be in there. Now he makes it an easy decision to select him, even if he's not an automatic bid. Yeah, like there's going to be a ton of movement, and not just movement in terms of what the standings look like for the automatic bid, but also movement in our perception of who has earned it, who can help them win, who are the easiest choices, who are the most difficult choices, all of that. It's going to be a really interesting few weeks. And to go back to our original kind of discussion about the intrigue of the playoffs, it's like that's what the intrigue is right now, right? Like we're mostly watching and mostly intrigued outside of our own betting and our own DFS for what does the Ryder Cup squad look like. We don't necessarily care about the playoffs. We just want to see how these guys are playing and how that shapes out, which we arguably could do a better job of if these were full field, just regular events and not some attempt at a playoff format like other sports have.
And that's what I was literally, you were thinking kind of on the same lines as, like, Max Homa shoots 74, would obviously miss the cut. Then he shoots 62, 65 on the weekend. And you're going to go from, hey, this dude should have been at home to now we've got to put him on the Ryder Cup team.
Yeah. Yeah. Great call. All right. Let's jump into some course fit stuff for this week. Really, really awesome course. So this one is certainly known as a ball strikers course, and the course fit model really reinforces that. We've got 28% of the weight to distance. That's well above average. A little bit down on accuracy off the tee, but honestly, like, off the tee performance is accounting for almost 40% of the weight combined. So there's still that quarter of the weight to iron play, and then a quarter of the weight to putting with a bit of a de-emphasis on around the green play. Basically, if you can strike your ball around this golf course, you're going to be set up for success. And then the last variable is, can you make enough putts to kind of put yourself over the hump and go from being in contention or around the top of the leaderboard to actually bringing home the win? Is there anything else about this course that really stands out to you in terms of what you're looking for from golfers this week?
To me, there's a lot of high leverage shots here. And then I think they just went to Zoysia fairways. I would love to get that confirmed, but so I went to school a couple hours from there and they were talking about it. One of the kids that we played on the team was an assistant pro there for a long time. But that changes a lot, because if that's true, which I would love to be able to find out for sure. I know they talked about it, But you're going from grainy chipping areas with the Bermuda fairways to Zoysia fairways changes a lot. So I'm going to look for more information as the week gets on. I've been so busy with work, I haven't been able to do any of that. But
would that make you pay more attention or less attention to around the green play?
Way less. A bad shot off Zoysia, you're going to hit it up there 5 feet as a tour player. A bad shot off grainy of Bermuda, you're going to hit it 1 foot in front of you.
Yeah, and typically around the green play accounts for somewhere between 15 and 20% of the weight. It's already down to 11 at this course. So if we are getting Zoysia, that brings it down even further, and it just reinforces everything about this course fit model as it already exists. So I actually really like that. In my Outrights article today, I talked about how one of the things that I like to do is not necessarily take all of the output of all of our models or betting models, the expected strokes gain projections, all that, not just taking it at face value, taking it blindly, but then looking at it and saying, okay, if this is wrong, in which direction is it wrong? And what you're saying here is, if the course fit model is wrong, it's wrong in the direction that just reinforces the overall fit. So I really like that. It allows us to lean into the uniqueness of the course fit model even more and maybe enhances our edge this week.
And I agree. I think the other edge this week is the birdies. I mean, I have a buddy, we've talked about this, the birdies above expectations this week is perfect because I think when you have a no-cut event, that matters a lot more than a normal event. So you kind of can combine the two with, which once again, it's total driving is going to come back to the same. But I've got a good friend that follows us all the time, and he would mention like the course fit, and then how many birdies can you make in 4 days. So you kind of get the combination factor, and I do think that the models this week have a better chance than ever to really be correct.
Yeah, I love the point you made there about birdie rate over expectation. In fact, it was one that I hadn't even had on the list of things I wanted to touch on this week, but absolutely we need to talk about it because you're 100% right. Like when we talk about the DFS side of things, it's just as much about playing the game of DFS as it is predicting which golfers will play the best. And part of that equation is finding the guys who are going to outproduce their real life leaderboard position in their DraftKings leaderboard position. And the best way you can do that is by making a ton of birdies. We have exactly that measure, exactly that metric with the birdie rate over expectation. That is on the FTN Daily site. It's on the FTN Bet site. So regardless of where you are a subscriber, you have access to all of that data, some really good stuff. Does that make you prioritize Rory over Scotty and Rahm this week? Because Scotty's at like 0.5 with his birdie rate over expectation. Rahm is at 0.4. And then there's Rory at 2.4 percentage points above expectation with his birdie rate.
I think that it works better with as you go down the field. And that's my opinion. I think that while you talk about the top of the board, I'm going to talk about the bottom of the board, right? So, like, as you're talking about the top three priced guys in the field, I'm going to go the other way and say, how is Davis Riley 6,200? You know what I mean? So I look at it the other side of it because I think if Scheffler, Rory, and Rahm all have their A game, they're all going to be in the same area. So you're just trying to guess which one's going to play better this week.
I completely agree. And I'll also throw in with those guys, they're also getting a lot more of their points from the finish position bonus. Whereas, the other 6,200 guys or 6,500 guys in comparison to Riley, that aspect of their scoring is going to be a much smaller proportion. So the difference in DraftKings points between Davis Riley and, let's say, Kurt Kitayama or Tom Hoagie or Sam Stevens is going to be more about how many birdies they made and less about how different their finish position is.
Yeah, and that's that's where I think the big leverage is. Even you can even go up to the middle range, the Siwoo Kim range and Hadwin, those guys. Like you're still looking at the same thing of who do I think on this golf course is going to make the most birdies. And, to me, there's got to be a little bit of form in this deal too. Like there's certain guys that are playing better than others. But, if you're not playing very good and you just find something, you're just going to be like, I'm just going to go play uber aggressive and see what happens. Like, what do you have to lose, right? I'm just going to go be as aggressive as I can be and see what happens. And you got a chance there, right?
Yeah. I think another key point to make about this week is we've been talking a lot on the show about volatility, round to round volatility, event to event volatility. And one of the key points there is that the more volatile players have a higher ceiling for what they're expected to do in a given tournament, because it means their best is really competing with the best's best. So like example number one all year has been Keegan Bradley. We've played him a ton. We got him at his best quite a few times, and we've gotten him at his worst quite a few times. Leaning into volatility this week is also a really strong idea, because the worst case scenario is no longer an explosive missed cut. He's still going to play 4 days, and hopefully he can score on the weekend, even if he has a really bad Thursday and Friday or something like that. And the upside case remains. It's that Keegan has a real chance to win. It's that, Cam Young or Sepp Straka have a real chance to get up there. Cameron Davis, another guy with the high volatility that we're looking for. So I think that's another aspect to take into account when you're talking DFS. Now, the betting side of things, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised to hear that Keegan is once again an outright for me. Would you have known that coming in?
Well, with just such a big lean into driving, it's obviously he's gonna pop every week, right? So, and that's the deal with guys. The high volatility guys are usually the guys that drive it really good, and then can they figure out their wedges, or can they figure out their iron play to make it work? And most people will think that it's putting, and it's not necessarily always putting to me, because your best putter and your worst putter on the PGA Tour from 20 feet is maybe a 1% difference, right?
Yeah.
It's more of who's hitting, if you can find a way to hit it really close to where your percentages go way up. So I think anybody that drives it, Cam Young, Keegan, all these guys that have the ability to drive it really, really good, if they can, figure out a way to hit their wedges close, because this place isn't overly long.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to come from. I love Keegan. All these names that you're mentioning obviously are super high. If you drive it good, you're going to have a chance to make a lot of birdies.
Yeah. There are a number of players in the field, Homa, Finau, Rory, who have really low round-to-round standard deviations and then really high event-to-event standard deviations. We talked about this a little bit over the last couple of weeks. But basically what that essentially means for those players is when they play well, they continue to play well. When they play poorly, they tend to continue to struggle. Keegan, on the other hand, has a really high round-to-round volatility and a really high event-to-event volatility, which basically means on any given day, we can't possibly know what to expect. We just know that the ceiling is there and the floor is there. Because of that, we give him some really, really strong odds relative to market. He's available at 80 to 1 kind of everywhere almost, but including on Bet Rivers, where we have the each way bet. At 80 to 1, he has an implied win probability of 1.2%. We give him a 2.0% chance to win. Where this bet becomes even stronger is the each way this week, because of the smaller field, is a 1/4 payout for 5 spots. So he's 80 to 1. You slash that by 4, 80 becomes 20 to 1, and it's 20 to 1 for a top 5. The best available just in the pure top 5 market is 12 to 1. So you're already getting a ton of value just from that. You're going from 12 to 1 to 20 to 1 for the exact same bet. But then we also find more value there. We have him basically at 7.8 to 1 as like the perfect price for him, or the fair price for him. So tons and tons of value for Keegan this week. No surprise there. We've been betting him all year. And I think for a lot of people, certainly it helped that we got the win on him at the Travelers. So a lot of the questions of why are you always on Keegan one out the door when you hit the guy at 100-1? But I think it's also helpful to kind of give a peek behind the curtain of understanding why. It's because of this volatility. Like, yes, we haven't projected as a really solid player, 0.99 baseline expected strokes gained per round, 1.14 course fit expected strokes gained this week. Both of those put him as, one of the better players in his price range, not the best, but he is the most volatile in pretty much every way. So when markets aren't accounting for that, when they're just kind of looking at how good is this player relative to the other guys priced around him, suddenly you get a ton of value.
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is Cam Davis, like hundreds plus for Cam Davis for his ability to drive the ball and then his, how many birdies he can make over 4 rounds. Like, he's one of those guys that can claw himself back in just by his ability to hit it far and drive it good. And I mean, it all goes down the same line, right? But Keegan's obviously more proven than Cam Davis is. He can, he's won, but I think it all kind of goes down the same. I mean, Steven Yager's another one. Like, he can win because he can make so many birdies. Like, he always shines in birdie fest, and you're giving these guys 100 plus. And I think you're getting these really good odds on these guys. Thigala is another one that comes to mind, that these super high odds because you have all the best players in the world, right? So if you can find a week where Scheffler, Rahm, Rory, these top guys kind of struggle a little bit, there's just so much of an open market there in that, the exactly the people we're talking about. I mean, I think I saw Cam Young at like mid-50s.
Yeah, I think he came down from that a little bit. Let's see. He is now available he's only 40-1 now, best available basically everywhere. He's either 40-1 or 35-1 at every single available sportsbook in Pennsylvania, at least. So yeah, we have him at 1.8%, so no value there. Man, I'm so fascinated by this different stability or different volatility measures and the way in which they're different, because I think there's absolutely a psychological aspect to this. Like, I do think there's something to be said about when a player is playing well and when he continues to play well, you can say, okay, that guy's confidence or his game is basically all about his confidence level. When he's playing well, he's confident, he's making freer swings. He's really focused in on the process of his putting and not necessarily the results. Whereas when he struggles, maybe he feels like everything is going against him. He's getting every unlucky break in the world. He's hitting these perfect 15-foot putts and they just won't ever drop. But when
how it translates
he misses that 15-footer when he thought he made a good putt, he doesn't feel like, oh my God, this is the worst, I can't make a putt. He feels like, oh, that was a really good stroke, I'm going to make the next one. And because he has that different mindset, maybe he does actually make the next one instead of missing the next one. So it's just so cool to see now, to have this like really clear picture about who is psychologically, more affected by his own play.
And it's interesting to me about what Vegas thinks of our top 3 players in the world right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is supposed to be your best field, right? On the PGA Tour. And you're telling me that Scottie Scheffler is only 7-1 amongst the best 70 golfers in the world? And Rory's 10-1 and Rahm's 11-1, I think is what I saw. But like, it's just unbelievable that Vegas thinks that highly. And then you can go all the way back to Cantlay. I think it was Cantlay next, 20-ish. But I mean, somewhere in that area. And it's just that they think that these 3 are so much better than everybody else. And especially Scheffler. Like, I know he's played really good, but he hasn't really won a lot recently. He's top 10 machine, but it's very fascinating to the respect that they give them.
Does it surprise you to know that Scheffler is 3rd in our win probability, Rory 1st, Rahm 2nd?
Not really. I mean, that's but I think that if you flip that to finish in the top 10, Scheffler, in my opinion, would probably be higher than both of those 2. So it's just different, right? They're just different. The other thing that I think that Scheffler's so good at is when he doesn't have it, so to speak, for a day or two, and how he finds it and still does something with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think on the one hand, I do think that like there's something to it that there's absolutely, this ability that he has to find it when he's struggling, to turn it around, to go from somebody who barely made the cut to playing extremely well on the weekend and being in contention. I also think that he's gotten a little bit lucky in that regard this year, where he was maybe fortunate to make a cut and then, got a fantastic weather draw on both Saturday and Sunday to get himself back in it, or something of that nature. Or, maybe it's that he was struggling to find something and then chipped in and made a bomb, and all of a sudden that created some positive momentum that he then rode to get himself back to a good spot. I don't think the top 10s will continue at this extremely just unbelievable rate. Like, I absolutely think he's still, without question, one of the 3 best players in the world. But the lack of volatility is also a little bit concerning from the upper end. That's the reason why he's projected below Rahm and Rory in the odds to win. It's because from a round to round perspective, he's one of the least volatile players on tour. And from an event to event perspective, he's also one of the least volatile players on tour, whereas Rahm is one of the more volatile round to round. Rory's one of the more volatile event to event. Both of those guys, therefore, have just a little bit more win equity. But very curious to see if that will actually play out over the next few years. Only time will tell.
Scheffler is like minus 120 to finish in the top 7.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Like, I mean, that's unbelievable against the best players in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we give him a 44% chance of a top 10. Where he passes Rory and Rahm is top 20, and then he kind of blows by them in the top 40. And if there was a cut this week, he would be head and shoulders above everybody in terms of made cut odds.
Yeah, I mean, all sounds about what we see, right?
Yep. Anyone else in this field that you think is worth discussing, either from a DFS perspective, an outright perspective, whatever?
I think there's a few guys that are a little bit high. I think there's a few guys that are a little bit low, but I think overall DraftKings did a pretty good job through and through. The first one that stood out to me was Davis Riley. Obviously, at 6,200 is just unbelievable to me. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is because of the things we talk about with the volatility, right? That's the biggest deal in a complete birdie fest.
And outside just his birdie rate over expectation is fantastic.
Yeah. And so outside of that, I didn't really see anything. Wyndham Clark seemed a little bit low to me. Cam Young seemed a little bit low to me. The flip side of an event like this, Russell Henley, I know he's only 7,800, but seems a little bit high to me for what the event you're playing. But yeah, all in all, I think DraftKings did a pretty good job outside of one or two guys. So there's not really anybody that I was just like, oh, this guy. Now, as far as the course goes, I think there's a few guys that I really like. I think Dietrich's going to play really well this week. I think I think he's a little bit better than what the public thinks. Outside of that, my only outrights are going to be on, some of those, the really high guys, the 90s to 100 to 1 type of guys. There's enough up there.
What if I told you that after the first run of DraftKings ownership, both in MME and single entry contests, only one player over $8,000 was projected for single digit ownership, and that player was 5th in our expected win odds? Would you be interested?
Yeah, for sure. I don't even care their name.
Oh, actually, I lied. 7th in expected win probability. Can you guess who it is?
Oh, hold on. Over 8,000.
Over 8,000 projected for single digit ownership, 7th in win odds.
Man, That's really difficult. I mean, and I would love for it to be Matsuyama, but I just don't know if that could be it.
It's not.
Come on. Who is it?
Think of who is really volatile. Who can give you like lightning in a bottle on any given day, but also snap hook. That's a bit of a hint. Snap hook, every single drive on a given day.
The most volatile over 8,000 is Sam Burns, but there's no way he's going to be single digit ownership.
Yeah, it's not Burns, it's Jordan Spieth.
I mean, Snap Hook should have given that away.
I thought you were going to get it from that. But yeah, we've got him projected for just 8.5% in MME, 8% in single entries, 2.9% chance of a win. Looks like a really strong DFS play to me. I think if nothing else changes, he'll be in my core.
I don't mind him. I'm surprised that that's the only guy single digit ownership though.
Yeah, it's because there's a bit of, I guess you would say, like kind of softer pricing. Like you mentioned, Riley all the way down at 6,200. Because it's only a 70-man field, there are some really strong players, guys who have kind of lived in the low sevens all year. Eric Cole, Chris Kirk. You'd probably throw Smalley in there, Taylor Moore down to 7. A lot of guys who are at least $500 cheaper than they've been. Siwoo Kim is 7,400. Connor's 76, Keegan 77, Henley 78. So those guys are pretty much right where they've been all year. But then, Cameron Young's down to 82, Burns down to 81. So because of this, lineups as a whole are more affordable, which just means that ownership is going to be more spread out in these mid to low 8s, upper 8s, low to mid 9s. All of that is going to be a little bit more spread out. And, part of it too is at the moment we don't have anybody projecting for 30% or something crazy like that. It's kind of topping out at the super expensive guys in the low 20s.
And I think that goes to DraftKings. Like that's usually when DraftKings does a good job, that's the way it is, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if DraftKings does or not even good, a reasonable job, like you don't get any explosive numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to their pricing a little bit, right? That we don't have anybody that's popping off the map.
Absolutely. Anything else about this event that you think is worth touching on?
I don't have much else. So I do want to tell one quick story. I played in my first real amateur golf tournament this week.
Mm-hmm.
So I played a couple of qualifiers, but I played in like an actual North Texas event. I had to about my C game, but I realized the difference from like minor, even like, lower level professional golf to amateur golf. Mm-hmm. I finished third amongst 84 guys. So everybody's like, oh, great playing. I really did not play that well. I managed to scrape it around. So I showed up on the first tee and I was like, this is crazy. 22 years ago, I got through a 3-for-1 playoff to get into the USAM on the exact first tee.
Nice.
So 2001, the way that I got into the USAM was at the course that I played my first like real amateur event at again.
That's great.
And then I also played with a guy that was supposed to be a 2 handicap to, that's how you get into the field or whatever by your handicap. Right. And he didn't know how to take drops. He shot a million. I think he shot 88 and didn't finish half the holes. It's just I just quit looking for his ball and whatever. He took a drop from a sprinkler head, and instead of he asked me how to do it, and I was like, oh, you get one club line, blah, blah, blah. Yep. He leaves his club on the ground and drops the ball onto the golf club. And it shoots off to the side, and he just picks everything up and goes over there and chips it. And I was like, whatever, bro. You just let it go. It is what it is.
That reminds me of our conversation last week when we were like, once the guy's at it, we're just like, do whatever you want. Just keep it moving.
Yeah, I was like, this is unbelievable. It's 110 degrees. This guy's got no idea what's going on.
That's hilarious.
I did play with a kid the last day that's going to be a junior in high school that he worked with Cameron McCormick, Spieth's instructor, that he's got a chance to be a good player. He struggled the last day. He's got a lot of, he's got to learn, but I was pretty impressed by the way he hit it and stuff, but just the variety of people that I played with in the golf. The amateur golf world is not for the faint of heart.
And no, it is not. Hey, that's a good reminder. I don't even know if there will be a show next week. Maybe we'll be able to record Sunday a day early or something, because a week from today, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Pennsylvania Open. So, we go from Eastern side to Western side and alternate of PA every year. So technically, I'm still the Eastern side defending champion. I've got that to live up to this week, but super excited for that. So may or may not have a show next week. We'll talk about that 2 weeks from now. In the meantime, if you haven't yet, be sure to check out all things FTN Fantasy. It's pretty much football season, guys. Aaron Schatz, previously Football Outsiders, his almanac, just the spectacular almanac, now here at FTN Fantasy. Check that out. Everything else you could possibly need for all of your fantasy football drafts, all that good stuff. Beat up on all your friends with FTN Fantasy. We'll see you over there, and we will catch you either next week or the week after. Thanks, guys.